the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies based in Cambodia, opens our doors, and we have a crazy, wild conference where we share ideas, we challenge each other, we think about new models, we explore frameworks, and we have a lot of fun and frivolity. So we hope tonight, with our high energy music, you are already in the mood for learning, for challenging, for listening, but also to contribute. And many of you, I'm so grateful that you're already introducing yourselves in the chat. Let's go crazy over the next 3 mornings, afternoons, and evenings together, wherever you are in the world. Because the most beautiful thing about this event this year is it's not just Asian, it's global, and we have friends from every part of the world who've signed up for this event. So we want to say a big, warm Cambodian welcome. It's evening here, the sun's setting, and it feels exactly the right moment for us to sit together and to learn and explore. I want to acknowledge our very faithful partner in this event, Misorial, who've accompanied us over the last 10 years. They're based in Germany. They're the kind of partner that every organization wants. Gentle, learning together, true partnership, but also paying the bills. So we're very grateful that they have been on this journey with us all the way through and again for this event in 2020. I want to kick off by talking a little bit about conflict. And conflict in the world today is something that we have become all too familiar with. And that's why we're all here, I believe, in this session and this Zoom room together. When we think about conflict, we think about Congo, we think about Mali, we think about Sudan, Syria, think about Somalia, think about Yemen. And in our own region, we think about Afghanistan, Rakhine, the Philippines, we think about red tagging there. We think about Kashmir. We think about the Korean Peninsula. Think about Sri Lanka. We think about so many more places in our region and in the Pacific, Papua New Guinea and Bougainville and so on. And so that means, as a peace practitioner community, maybe we're not getting this right. And maybe we have some work and deeper reflection to do. Maybe that's why we need to be together in these 3 sessions and beyond, and to use this special year of 2020 to reset and to rethink and to reevaluate. And so in this session, in this conference, we have taken the opportunity to ask ourselves some hard questions. And the most important question is why? Why do we live in a world with such complex, complicated, systemic, protracted conflicts? And what is it that we are not getting right in the way that we are addressing those conflicts? It's time for us to reconsider mediation. It's time for us to reconsider our models of dialogue. It's time for us to challenge the status quo in the way that we understand peacemaking, peace building, political mediation, and all that goes with it. In World War II, they say mediation is 3,000 years old, but in the modern era, in World War II, we saw the first envoys go out into the world to try to solve problems. People like Folke Bernadotte in Sweden, he worked hard all through World War II to engage Nazis, to talk to Churchill, to try to help save people on the ground. He is one of the most famous UN envoys later on that goes to Palestine and tries to end the Middle Eastern Israeli-Palestine conflict. Alongside of him were people like Doug Homashad. There were people like Ralph Bunche, who went out from other places in the world also to try and work out ways that they could end the conflict of the post-50s and early 60s. Of course, then we went into an era of Cold War and mediation was not so fashionable, but the United Nations held on to its charter in Chapter 6, which says mediation is really part of the DNA of the United Nations. And so today, many of us still look up, hoping to see how the United Nations might save us, or how those big man mediators, those envoys that fly in and bring parties together and try to get them to find some way of making an agreement. But somehow that system is not working. In the 1980s, we tried to improve this model, and we came up with track 1 diplomacy. So governments and envoys, maybe they can't do this. We need other models. We need to be able to find ways of having top level dialogue where people might be flown away to Camp David or to Norway or to other places in the world where they can have secret talks and try to work out their differences. We realized that that was a little bit exclusive, and so we added track 2. And track 2 was some kind of professional mediation, people that had been trained to help those stakeholders come together. It became an expertise, and experts joined in the multi-track. But of course, then those of us from civil society said, hang on a minute, wait, we need a voice. When you do that, you exclude us. You exclude young people, you exclude women, you exclude Indigenous people. And so more tracks were developed, tracks for academics and researchers and civil society. And we ended up with a hierarchical system of multi-track where the people at the top talk to each other and those underneath tried to find ways to get their messages through and waited for the results of the mediation to filter down. Somehow that system doesn't seem to be working. And so in the 2019s, 21st century came, and we brought Facebook, and we got social media, and we got Twitter, and we got Telegram and Signal and a myriad of other ways to communicate. And suddenly we could send a message to the head of an armed group. Suddenly we could communicate with heads of state by tweeting and sending them messages. Suddenly we could become Facebook friends with a range of stakeholders, and we had access, better access than we've ever had before. And so somehow that hierarchical system started to erode. In this conference, CPCS has decided to try and unpack these models, because for us, over the last 3 years, we have explored and tried different approaches to mediation. One of them we call Pax Spiral, or spiraling for peace. In a complicated, complex system of conflict, where a conflict is not just bound by one geographical area. A conflict no longer respects borders, but is geopolitical, economic, connected to nations all around it, but it's also ethnic and religious, and sometimes about poverty. When we have that complexity, we need to find complex systems to respond to them in terms of mediation, dialogue, facilitation, and building peace. So spiraling for peace is about whipping all of the stakeholders, not literally whipping, but moving everybody in the same direction, trying to get people to work towards a similar vision, even if they're not in the same peace talks room together. It's about governments and armed groups and political parties and civil society not being one above the other, but being interconnected towards a shared vision. That's a lot of background, egoless, behind the scenes mediation and facilitation. We've also been testing the experience of Sue and Steve Williams, who wrote a book, Being in the Middle by Being on the Edge. That means, how do we facilitate a peace process without being that person who's flown in from outside, but around the edges, connecting the dots and trying to get people on the same page to know each other. And so many of you, when you signed up for this event, assumed that you were signing up for a conference that was going to discuss gender and peace building. And some of you even asked us, oh, excuse me, but are men allowed? And we said, of course men are allowed, women are allowed, young people are allowed, people with two heads are even allowed. Everybody is welcome here. Big man mediation is not about men. It's about a hierarchical system that has become outdated in our way of approaching mediation and conflict. And that's why we chose this theme. Because for us, it's time to move beyond those frameworks and to explore new ways. And that's why we have chosen 6 of the world's peace leaders, mediators, and negotiators to share with you over these 3 sessions their own experiences of facilitating and mediating conflict, of being negotiators, of taking leadership and mobilizing civil society and governments together towards making a significant peace. You will get to meet Amaya, who is working from India, but on all of the complexity of conflicts in her region. Julia, who has built a global movement that works on peace leadership and peace systems. Meredith, who's been involved in high-level political mediation in our region, in Africa, and now in Canada. Christine Ahn, who is well known in the US as a Korean peace activist, but who is using her mobilization to change the discourse on the Korean Peninsula and thereby mediate that conflict. Shadia, who many of you in this room already know, who's come through a journey of peace in her own life, today to be one of ASEAN's leading peace mediators. And Neha, who has actually been mentoring our team in her journey in Mozambique and how she facilitated the Mozambique peace talks by being on the edge. And for her, that was the most effective place to be. So without spoiling what you're going to hear over the next days, for us, the conference theme tonight represents political mobilization. It's about sharing power. It's about being egoless and tireless and showing up. It's about always believing and hoping and understanding that peace is always possible, that persistence pays, that we have to do this in partnership and we have to do this together. If you want to talk about gender, maybe that's a feminist model of mediation. And maybe feminism has nothing to do with gender, but everything to do with the way that we share power with one another, that we give up power, that the more power we give away, the more power there is. And I hope that you look for that theme. What these mediators do works. How do we mainstream what they do and how we get there? Many of you who know me well know that usually I like to share some reflections from my old friend who passed away some years ago, but has led us in our journey of peace building. Her name was Deka Ibrahim Abdi. And what she said about peace processes as a woman who had facilitated all across East Africa, nomadic conflicts, conflicts in Somalia, and so on. She said participation in a peace process is not about the mathematics of numbers and percentages in relation to who is in the majority or the minority. It is about plurality, diversity, participation, and ownership of all those affected by conflict. And so as we kick off the 9th Asian Peace Practitioner Research Conference, not conflict, we dedicate this journey to those who day and night live in the midst of violence and are considered conflict-affected communities, but whose voices we rarely hear. Thank you.